My world was made of pixels and deadlines. Every day began with the buzz of an alarm and ended with the cold glow of a laptop screen. I lived in a high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, but I rarely noticed the view. My focus was always locked onto projects, schedules, and the endless rhythm of productivity. I was a freelance designer, constantly juggling client calls, revisions, and deadlines that never truly ended. My phone never stopped buzzing. I measured time not in hours, but in notifications. Meals were often skipped or eaten one-handed while replying to emails. Sleep? That was something I negotiated with, something that happened only when absolutely necessary. My friends would invite me out, but I almost always said no. "I've got work," I would reply, as if that excuse made me noble. The truth was, I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to rest. I believed that if I wasn't constantly producing, constantly connected, I was falling behind. But behind what? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that I was tired. Tired in a way that coffee couldn't fix. And deep down, I felt something was missing, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Success had a shape. For me, it looked like a sleek desk, dual monitors, and a digital calendar filled to the edges. My days were structured down to the minute. Morning briefs, client feedback sessions, design revisions, and late-night brainstorming. I had carved out a reputation for being fast, efficient, always available. I told myself I was winning. I told myself this was what ambition looked like. But every achievement felt hollow the moment it was done. I barely had time to breathe before the next task demanded my attention. The lines between day and night blurred. I worked through weekends. Holidays became working days in disguise. My life was a loop. Wake, work, eat, work, sleep, repeat. Productivity was my addiction, and like all addictions, it gave less and took more over time. I couldn't remember the last time I sat quietly, without a screen in front of me. I couldn't remember the last real conversation I'd had that wasn't about work. Even music, something I once loved deeply, became just background noise to drown out the silence I was too afraid to hear. There were signs, of course, small cracks in the system. I forgot things easily. I was often irritated without reason. My shoulders were always tense, my mind always racing. But I ignored them. I was too busy, too important. Until one morning, as I stared blankly at my screen, a thought slipped into my mind, quiet and uninvited. What would happen if I just stopped? The thought scared me, so I buried it the way I buried everything that didn't serve the grind. But that question didn't go away. It stayed, silent and persistent, waiting for the right moment to come back louder. And that moment was closer than I knew. The decision came quietly, like a whisper I couldn't ignore anymore. I needed space. Not just from the city, but from the constant noise inside my head. Deadlines, calls, notifications, they had become my entire world, and that world was starting to collapse. I told myself it was a strategic break, a reset. But the truth was, I was running. I found a listing online, a modern cabin tucked deep in the mountains, surrounded by pine trees and silence. The photos showed a place with large windows, a long wooden table, fast Wi-Fi, and not much else. It was perfect. I could disappear for a week, finish the biggest project of my career, and come back sharper than ever. That was the plan. I packed everything I thought I needed: 2 laptops, an external monitor, backup hard drives, chargers, power banks, even a second phone. I wasn't escaping technology, I was just relocating it. I didn't want peace, I wanted uninterrupted productivity. The drive up was long and quiet. With every mile, the city faded behind me, replaced by tall trees and winding roads. By the time I arrived, it was late afternoon. The air was cold and crisp. The silence was heavy, almost too heavy. The cabin stood alone on a hill, its glass windows glowing gold in the fading light. Inside, it was clean, minimal, modern. Everything I needed to work, nothing I didn't. I barely noticed the view. My first instinct was to set up my workstation, position the monitor for good lighting, check the Wi-Fi speed. It was strong. I felt a strange sense of relief. This wasn't a vacation. It was a mission. I came here to focus, to lock in, to prove to myself that I could still deliver under pressure. I had no idea how wrong I was. The first day went exactly as planned, better even. I worked for 16 hours straight, stopping only to stretch or refill my mug for instant coffee. The Wi-Fi held steady, the power never blinked, and my ideas flowed faster than they had in weeks. Outside, the mountains stood tall and silent, a stunning backdrop I barely noticed. To me, they were just high-definition wallpaper, beautiful but irrelevant.
Inside the cabin, everything obeyed me. My screens glowed with potential, designs took shape, problems unraveled, and my confidence surged. I was finally alone with my work. No emails I didn't choose to answer, no calls I couldn't silence. It felt clean, controlled, efficient. I didn't even open the curtains all the way. I didn't want distractions. The natural world outside, with its endless stillness and slow rhythms, felt too foreign, too slow. I was here for progress. When night came, I didn't notice. I worked until the numbers on the corner of my screen startled me. It was past midnight. My back ached and my eyes were dry, but I felt accomplished. I had done more in one day than I had managed in a week back in the city. I shut my laptop with a satisfying click, confident that this trip would be the turning point, the edge I needed to stay ahead. I had escaped the chaos, but not the pace. The silence around me wasn't a problem, it was fuel. Without noise, I was sharper, faster, stronger. As I lay in bed, I replayed my designs in my head like a lullaby. I felt like I'd cracked the code. Isolation equals productivity. What I didn't know was that nature doesn't follow plans, and the silence I thought I controlled was about to become something else entirely. It began as a whisper, a faint rustling in the trees outside, so soft I barely noticed. I was deep into another design sprint, headphones on, eyes fixed on the screen, but then the light in the cabin began to shift. What had been a clear blue afternoon slowly turned gray, the kind of heavy gray that seems to press down on the world. The wind picked up. At first it was just background noise, something the noise-canceling headphones easily filtered out, but it grew louder, stronger, a low howl that rattled the windows and made the trees sway like they were alive. Rain tapped against the glass in uneven rhythms until it turned into a full drum beat. The storm had arrived. I sighed, annoyed. This was not part of the plan. I turned up the volume on my music, trying to drown out the distraction, but then the lights flickered, once, twice, and with a loud final crack of thunder, everything went dark. The screens went black, the music cut out, the humming of the computer fan stopped. For a moment, I just sat there, frozen, waiting for it to come back. But nothing happened. The silence that followed was absolute. No glow, no buzz, no hum, just the sound of rain and wind screaming outside. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. A thin beam of light pushed back the darkness, but barely. I checked the fuse box. Everything looked fine. The power wasn't just out in the cabin, it was out everywhere. I told myself it was temporary. I still had my laptop battery. I could work offline for a few hours. It would be fine. But when I opened my laptop again, two small icons in the corner shattered that illusion. No Wi-Fi. No internet. I picked up my phone. No signal. Not a single bar. I was completely cut off. At first, it was just frustration. This was not supposed to happen. I'd planned for every scenario except this one. No power, no internet, no way to access my cloud files. My entire workflow was built on connectivity. Without it, I was stuck. A designer without his tools. A planner without a plan. I paced the room, hoping the signal would return, checking my phone every few minutes like a ritual, but the bars never came back. The battery icon on my laptop showed 2 hours remaining. After that, even the light would be gone. The silence that once felt empowering now pressed in on me. My fortress of focus had turned into a trap. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't know what to do next. The cabin, once sleek and modern, now felt ancient and hollow. The darkness inside was thick, almost physical. My laptop battery drained faster than expected, and when the screen finally dimmed and died, it was like the last part of the world I understood vanished with it. I was alone. Truly alone. I turned off my phone's flashlight to conserve what little power I had left. Instantly, the room was swallowed in black. No streetlights outside, no glow from buildings, just darkness. Pure, complete, and unfamiliar. In the city, the night is never fully dark. There's always a sign, a screen, something buzzing in the distance. But here there was nothing. I stumbled through the room, opening drawers and cabinets in search of candles, a flashlight, anything. But the cabin, for all its modern charm, wasn't built for old problems. No power meant no light, no heat, no help. The electric stove was useless, the microwave dead. I had some snacks, but nothing that resembled a real meal. The temperature was dropping fast. The walls, which once looked so clean and minimal, now felt bare and unforgiving. I wrapped myself in blankets and sat on the couch, my thoughts spinning. I kept checking my phone out of habit, even though I knew no messages were coming.
The silence inside the cabin roared louder than the storm outside. I could hear my own heartbeat, the creaking of the wooden beams, and the soft, rhythmic beat of rain on glass. But most of all, I heard my thoughts, raw, unfiltered, and persistent. I realized how helpless I was without my devices. I could design digital experiences, build complex systems, and manage global teams. But I couldn't light a fire. I couldn't warm a room. I couldn't feed myself without a button to press. It was a strange kind of fear, not the fear of danger, but of exposure. Stripped of my tools, I saw how much of my confidence came from things outside myself. I wasn't in control anymore, and that terrified me. I lay on the couch, eyes open, staring into the dark. I wasn't thinking about my project anymore. I was thinking about how unprepared I was for stillness, for silence, for myself. By morning, the cabin was ice cold. The storm outside had eased slightly, but inside the stillness was sharp. My breath came out in visible clouds. I rubbed my hands together, trying to remember the last time I'd ever had to worry about staying warm. Central heating had always been there, reliable, invisible, taken for granted. Then I remembered the fireplace. I had walked past it when I first arrived, barely noticing it. At the time, it seemed decorative, unnecessary. Now it was my only hope. I moved to it in the dim gray light of dawn. Next to the hearth, there was a small stack of firewood and a worn box of matches on the mantel. I stared at them like they were ancient artifacts. I had never built a fire before. Not a real one. Not with my own hands. My first attempt was a disaster. I stacked too much paper beneath the logs, lighting it hastily. The paper flared up, burned out, and left the wood untouched. Smoke filled the room, stinging my eyes and throat. I coughed and waved it away, angry and embarrassed. I could manage entire design teams across time zones, but I couldn't light a simple fire? I sat on the cold floor, defeated, staring at the fireplace like it had insulted me. But something in me refused to give up. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was desperation. I tried again, this time slower. I thought like an engineer. Fire needs 3 things: fuel, heat, and air. I arranged the wood in a small pyramid, careful to leave space for air to move. I placed the kindling beneath it, small and dry. I struck the match. The flame flickered, caught the paper, then touched the kindling. I held my breath. The wood darkened, cracked, then began to glow. And then finally, fire. A real flame. Steady. Warm. Alive. I sat there in awe, watching it grow. It wasn't just heat. It was something deeper, something primal. I had made this with my own hands. And for the first time since arriving, I didn't feel helpless. I felt human. The fire became my new screen. I sat in front of it for hours, watching the flames shift and dance like slow, silent music. It gave off a soft light that moved across the walls like shadows in a dream. The crackling filled the silence, not in an intrusive way, but in a comforting one. I no longer reached for my phone. I'd stopped checking the corner of the room for a blinking router light. Something had shifted. Without the usual flood of emails and messages, my thoughts had room to stretch. But soon, even those quiet thoughts began to wander, restless for something to hold on to. That's when I noticed the bookshelf. It was tucked in the far corner, nearly invisible in the dim cabin light. Dusty and uneven, filled with old paperbacks and forgotten hardcovers. I brushed my hand over the spines and pulled one out. A book of short stories with a worn cover and pages the color of tea. I didn't recognize the author. It didn't matter. I brought the book to the fire and began to read. At first, my eyes struggled. The flickering firelight made the words sway on the page. There were no glowing letters, no hyperlinks, no notifications. Just printed words, fragile and still. I turned each page slowly, like opening a window into another world. And then I forgot where I was. I forgot about the storm, the power, the project. I was inside the story, fully present, fully still. I hadn't read like that in years, not for work, not to learn, just to be carried by language. There was something sacred in that moment, a kind of joy I had forgotten existed. Not loud, not urgent, just quiet and full. The storm passed in the night. When I woke up, the air felt different, lighter, still. I opened the cabin door and stepped outside for the first time since I arrived. The world had transformed. Snow blanketed everything, soft and untouched. The sky was a brilliant blue, so clear it felt endless. The cold stung my cheeks, but it also made me feel awake in a way no cup of coffee ever had. I walked without purpose, without a phone, without headphones. Just me and the forest. The snow crunched softly beneath my boots. Pines stood tall like ancient guardians, their branches heavy with white. A few birds sang in the distance. The world was quiet, but not empty. Every sound, every breath felt vivid. I didn't think about work. I didn't think about my inbox. For once, I wasn't rushing anywhere. I wasn't optimizing anything. I was simply here. I found a flat rock beside a frozen stream and sat down. The sun warmed my face, and I let myself be still. No multitasking, no checking the time, just sitting, listening to the hush of nature around me. And in that silence, I heard something I hadn't heard in a long time. Myself. Not the version tied to tasks and deadlines, but something older, something honest. I realized I hadn't been resting, not for years. I'd been sprinting on a treadmill, mistaking exhaustion for purpose. But now, for the first time, I felt stillness not as a threat, but as a gift. On the fourth morning, a low hum returned to the cabin. The lights flickered, once, then held. My phone, long forgotten and left charging, lit up and began to buzz. Messages, emails, missed calls, notifications tumbling in like a flood. The digital world was back, loud and hungry. A few days ago, that sound would have filled me with adrenaline. Now, it felt strange, distant, like an echo from a place I no longer belonged to. I looked at my laptop on the table, its screen glowing softly, waiting. The deadline I had once obsessed over still existed, still needed my attention. But I didn't move toward it. Not yet. Instead, I stepped outside into the cold morning air. The sunrise had painted the sky in gentle strokes of orange and pink. No filter could improve it. No screen could capture it. It was quiet and beautiful and enough. When I returned to the city, I didn't quit my job. I still worked hard, but I also listened more, walked more, sat in silence more, because now I knew success is nothing without stillness.